The sower. Well, it's a subject Van Gogh treated more than once. Again, I think we're struck very much by the flatness of the composition. We're seeing it very much as a two-dimensional design rather than the representation of space. There's the diagonals of the field does indicate three-dimensional space, but the fact that the sower's legs are cut off by the frame and the tree is cut off by the frame, we don't see where the tree is rooted. Neither of them are within the space of the painting as it's depicted. That has all an effect of flattening everything out. The fact that the tree starts below the space of the painting and it ends above the space of the painting, that also makes this a very flattening motif. This is really a rather unusual compositional design to have such a bold diagonal going straight across the space of the painting. Flattening it out helps to flatten it out. But that compositional device is something that would have been inspired by looking at Japanese prints with their different compositional emphases. I'll show you such a print when we come to look at Gauguin. I'm not showing you one here. So this is the old way of sowing seed by hand, having a bag of seeds and just broadcasting it. That's the original meaning of that word, broadcast. Just throw out the seeds on the ground. So if you like, it's the beginning of the process of the agricultural year, the planting of seeds that will lead to the sprouting, the growing, and eventually the harvesting, you know. The sun is setting. We're back to this theme. I keep saying he's thinking in terms of binary opposites, day and night. Well, the sun is very big in this painting. It's massive. It's almost like a halo for the figure, so that introduces a quasi-religious feel to the painting. But the sun is also setting, so it's the end of a day, the dusk, it's the evening feeling coming on. Sowing is the beginning of something, and yet dusk is the end of something, the end of the day. You know, he's thinking of day and night. So beginnings and endings, or maybe part of the idea, this is a sort of interpretation, if you like, that the end is not the end. You know, something happens beyond the end. New life will grow. These kind of ideas are there a lot in thinking about sowing and reaping. You know, there's an English folk song called John Barleycorn is Dead. It's about, we bury him in the ground, but then he comes back up again. British farm labourers, they would plant their crops on Good Friday. That's the day Christ went into the tomb, but we know he came back up again. Maybe it's propitious to put something in the ground on that day, and then it's more likely to come back up. Or we can go to the Bible itself and find, you know, metaphors of sowing and actually sowing and reaping. You know, in the Galatians chapter 6 verse 7, whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. You know, what you do will have consequences that you will have to face up to. And Van Gogh himself is very aware of all that. I mean, anyone growing up in that place and time, let alone the son of a preacher, someone who had been a preacher himself, would be well aware of those biblical metaphors about sowing and reaping. But he applies it to painting itself. He says, painting is sometimes sowing, though the painter may not reap. So it's more than a purely literal representation of the life of an agricultural labourer. I suppose that's pretty clear, isn't it? Perhaps the most famous sower in the history of art is that of Millet. And Van Gogh, I think, is both in general terms deeply influenced by Millet, but also in specific terms in this painting is influenced by Millet. the fact that Millet represents the sower as a solitary figure, the fact that actually it's the end of the day as well, that's also something the two have in common. The fact that there's a sort of anonymity to the figure, we can't quite make out his features, it's getting dark, his hat is casting a shadow. There's a slightly heroic quality to the figure here. It's almost like a figure in some classical painting, but yet he's a common labourer. There's less human interest, surely, yes, in the Van Gogh. The face is even more anonymous. But they are close. Millet is, one of the most important realist artists, and therefore an inspiration behind the Hague School artists that Van Gogh studied from, and generally a great influence. He'd read the biography of Millet, which he got a very strong sense of him as an artist. The technique is so different, the colour instead of the light and dark composition. I think in the Millet there's already a slight, maybe in some Millet work there's a slight religious association there, even though he's showing real life much more. And Van Gogh picks up on that. Writing to his artist friend Bernard, he says, "If I am at all capable of a spiritual thrill, then I bow before that study by Millet, which is powerful enough to make one tremble. Peasants carrying back to the farm a calf just born in the fields. That, my friend, all people have felt from France to America." So, there's an idea that there's a sort of spirituality even in the depiction of everyday events of rural life, is something Van Gogh gets from Millet. I think it says something about Van Gogh's working process, that it's not just that he was interested in Millet when he was young and learning the realist style. He stays interested in him. He's sort of faithful to his influences. So even at this later stage, he's still looking back to Millet. Even though they parted ways in terms of the style of their work, still he's looking at him and learning new things. It's actually a kind of interesting thing that you can learn, even though you're at completely different stages of your own artistic evolution. You could be learning from the same source, seeing different things in the same source, rather than needing new artistic friends, as it were. He even comes back towards the very end of his life to make a copy of the Millet Sower. We think of this sort of copying as something that artists will do when they're students, but no, for Van Gogh, he's doing it still at the end of his life. Another work with the Sower theme by Van Gogh. Again, you have the sun setting, that same theme. This is actually a little earlier. So he painted this during the summer. It's something a bit strange here, actually. You see the corn is ripe, ready to be harvested over here, and yet here the corn has already been harvested, but someone is out sowing seeds already. This is really a bit strange. You harvest corn at the end of the summer. You don't sow seeds at the end of the summer. Actually, that's too soon. You've got to sow later on in the autumn, or sometimes you sow it in spring after the ground thaws up in a northern climate. And certainly you can't just sow it directly into the ground as soon as you've harvested the wheat. You need to turn the soil with harrows and plows. Maybe you need to burn the stubble first or something like that. Anyway, all that takes time. You've got to prepare the soil. The crows are in the field, but I think the answer to this puzzle is that it's not that Van Gogh is an idiot. He doesn't understand anything about agriculture. I think he's deliberately creating a kind of metaphor of putting together different things. Again, it's the clash of different moments that I like to talk about as something in his work. Endings and beginnings, fruitions and starts. Sunsets and dawns, or almost. Or here's another binary, sowing and reaping. Well, that's implicit here, isn't it? He puts the two together. We don't see a reaper, but someone has been cutting all the corn that was standing here, and someone's going to have to come and cut all the corn that's standing there very soon. Well, here is that activity of reaping shown. So it's a sort of companion to the subject of the sower, sowing and reaping. Even in the biblical quotation I gave you, the two are put together. Certainly people think of them together, the start and end of the same process. And explicitly Van Gogh is thinking that way. So he's talking about this reaper theme. I saw then in this reaper a vague figure struggling like a devil in great heat to come to the end of his task. I saw then in it the image of death, in the sense that humanity would be the wheat one reaps. So it is, if you like, the opposite of the sower I tried before. So explicitly he's talking about the symbolism of death. It's not just about wheat fields, it's about us, human life and its human mortality. And he's also explicitly saying there are kind of opposites or pairs or binary of some kind. Well, it's common anyway in, say in English you talk about personified death as the grim reaper. Here's Van Gogh again. Aren't we who live on bread ourselves wheat to a considerable extent? At least should we not submit to growing without the power to move like a plant and to be mown like it when we are ripe? So I think the things that Van Gogh says like that make it very clear how he is thinking. He wants to express a mood, but he also has this sort of quite developed personal symbolism about important matters, life and death. There are several scenes with the same view, with the mountains behind and a wheat field with a wall at the end of it. Actually, these are scenes from Saint-Remy after he had some kind of mental breakdown. That happened during the time when Gauguin was visiting him at Arles. And then he spent some time in an asylum at Saint-Remy, still in Provence, but a slightly different location. So these are scenes he's taken while he's there. He wasn't carried away to a mental hospital. He put himself voluntarily into this sort of care there. He was able to carry on with his painting while he was recuperating. So this may be from his scene from his room, Similar scene without the reaper, the corn growing. Distortions of forms, the flame-like forms of the cypress tree. Cypress tree, a tree that is grown in graveyards, commonly in Europe. It has this association with death because it's a tree whose leaves are evergreen. That's some association to immortality. I think that's not, irrelevant to the fact of why it's being included here. It's not just that there was cypress tree there. Distortions of forms. Even the mountains feel kind of active forms. Every form in the painting is mobile, one form linking to another. Of course, at the level of brushstrokes, we're very aware of the individual brushstrokes, create kind of rhythmic power. You almost want to think about the painting in musical terms. And it produces a sort of harmony of forms across the surface. It's not necessarily a negative mood. I mean, that sense of linking everything into one big flow, it could be a kind of almost like a mystical sense of harmony or something. Despite difference, despite death, if you want to put it that way. Well, if the cypress is associated with death, maybe night is also associated with death. Night versus day. That day is obviously to do with life. So the road with cypresses. Putting the two things together, the cypress and nighttime, reinforcing each other. When he writes about this painting, he says, "When I had done those sunflowers, I looked for the opposite and yet the equivalent. And I said, it is the cypress." So, yeah, in his personal symbolism, he's almost saying, well, if the sunflower equals daytime and life, that maybe the cypress equals nighttime and death, So he's spelling it out to a certain extent, what he's trying to do in these paintings. Again, you've got that sort of rhythmic distortion of everything. The shape of the road seems sort of buckled, almost like an earthquake going on. And the brushwork activates the whole surface, flame-like form of the cypress tree again. Nighttime, under a nighttime sky. These bands of hatched strokes, very prominent textured surface. That's something we're not really getting looking at projected images. Actually, we're not even getting a sense of the colour. These projectors will falsify colour. The colour that's there on that projected image is not the colour I'm looking at here on the computer screen in front of me. And of course, that image, in some cases our images are very good. They're made from the original artwork. Someone took a photo directly from the artwork. A lot of them are very good like that. But some will be taken from illustrations in books. So that would be a reproduction, not of paint, but of printer's ink. Printer's ink can't represent oil paint perfectly itself. So we're losing a lot. But certainly we lose texture in a projected image like this. That's very important for an artist like Van Gogh. Maybe less important, say, if you're looking at a piece of photographic art, then there is no textured surface that you're dealing with. This is just a brief look at something that we'll come back to, the theme of the interaction between Gauguin and Van Gogh when Gauguin came to stay with him, and there's a famous episode that resulted in Van Gogh cutting a part of his ear off. That scared Gauguin. Gauguin left soon after that. So that happened just before Christmas. Two paintings, one by Van Gogh, this is the one we're looking at here, and one by Gauguin with very similar scenes. So give us a little start at comparing their work. Similar scenes, and in a way Van Gogh is moving a little bit towards Gauguin here. This kind of very, sort of rhythmic contours is a little bit more Gauguin than Van Gogh, I'd say. The broken brushwork is a little bit more systematized than we normally see in Van Gogh's painting at this time, and that you could say is a little bit of a throwback for his work at this time. It's a throwback to the influence of Seurat, who had this very systematic, pointerless touch in his work. Ultimately, I think, just to jump ahead to the main thing I want to say about their interaction, they do have an interaction at that time, and Van Gogh is particularly willing to learn from Gauguin. they've been in correspondence, and that correspondence would be very nurturing for him. And he really wanted Gauguin to join him. Gauguin joins him, I suppose, partly to please Van Gogh's brother Theo. But ultimately, they're actually trying to do something very different. So Gauguin is much more willing to work from the imagination, much less interested in working directly from life than Van Gogh. But as I say, I'll say more when we look at Gauguin himself. So again, this is documenting Van Gogh's time in the asylum at Saint-Rémy, actually showing the asylum itself. At a certain point, I think he had to rely more on watercolours. A lot of those copies he makes of other artists' work, it also relates to those times when he's unwell, when he can't really go out into the landscape. He has to stay indoors for whatever reason, and then he will make copies from the illustrations he has in his collection. So that's another reason behind so much copying so late in life. You have to have, even if you're an artist who your main interest is working out of doors, you have to have things you can do when it's not possible to do that. Cézanne is the same way. If you see a Cézanne still life, you can almost imagine, that was a rainy day when he was painting those apples, because if it was a sunny day, he'd have been outdoors. Actually, he died because he went outdoors and the weather changed and he got drenched through, caught pneumonia. Well, a very important part of Van Gogh's work, and I've actually sort of delayed till now to introducing it, is his self-portraiture. Self-portrait from May 1890, so this is a self-portrait from towards the end of his life. It's the last real self-portrait, I think. We can see how, maybe compared to a landscape portraiture or any, but especially portraiture, but any human figure, it's harder to abstract. You can't sort of push. You can push trees around in a landscape. If a tree's in the wrong place, you can pretend it was somewhere else, and no one's really going to notice, right? But you can't. If a nose is in the wrong place, compositionally, you can't move it somewhere else because everyone would immediately think that's bizarre. Unless you are Picasso, then you can do what the hell you want. By that point in time, you can do what the hell you want because you have the vocabulary that allows that. Maybe even that's one way of thinking about what Picasso is doing. He's saying, how little information can I give you about a face and you still read it as a face? How far can I push you without losing you? Well, the abstractedness comes in through the background, I suppose, above everything else. So it's a painting about, if portraiture is painting about appearances, about detail, you can't ultimately give up detailed likeness altogether if you're painting a portrait. Or it presents you a great challenge to simplify, to abstract. And that's why we'll see, actually, going back to Picasso, during his key Cubist development moments, he actually becomes paradoxically very interested in portraiture. But the background is where Van Gogh can abstract fully. Let's walk him out of the painting and we just have the background. That's abstract art already. It's still the 19th century, but we have a kind of abstract art conveying feelings through shapes and colours, forms. That's one of the things about abstract art, that in a way the way was prepared for it already. There were abstract elements or dimensions of art already before abstract art appeared. So the swirling background, it helps convey a sense of the mood. By this point in art history, it's not enough to just show what shape someone's nose was. What the hell does that tell us about anything? We're more interested in the inner life of the person. Maybe in the Renaissance, or there would be some notion that if someone has a beautiful soul, that will be somehow expressed in a beautiful appearance, that inner and outer go together, and by capturing the outer, you'll capture the inner. even in the 19th century, there was that feeling of phrenology. You can test the bumps on someone's head, and you'll learn about their personality. But those ideas are the limit of breaking down. What can a face tell you? The look of a face. Very little, really. Appearance and reality are starting to lose touch. The whole genre of portraiture is starting to go into crisis as a result. The modern portrait has to go in completely different spaces. So Van Gogh is at the forefront of that, you could say. He wants to tell you, it's a self-portrait, he wants to tell you about his inner life. And the swirling background helps to convey that, the colour scheme and so forth. So choosing blue, it's the same colour as his jacket, so that unifies the painting. And just as there are swirls in the background, so that the forms of his jacket seem to be swirling to some extent. He's still in this world of interest in complementaries. He's using the sort of slightly red-headed beard becomes very orange. Not that realistic, but it's, orange is the complementary of blue. Clashing, Complementary, the word sounds almost like, it's two things that sort of nicely fit together. Actually, that doesn't quite capture the clash of colours they're opposites, that contain none of each other in each other. He's turned his head around, he's slightly hiding one ear that was damaged, Again, people want to read biography onto him. He was the mad Van Gogh. That was the mad painter. Okay, here's the picture that shows how he is mad, or the swirling. No, I think maybe you'd be better off if you say it shows a man trying to hold on to sanity or something like that. Maybe that's a better representation. All of this is conjecture, of course. And even if Van Gogh told us what the image means, that doesn't mean we have the final answer. We as art historians, we have to take responsibility for our interpretations. What the artist says is not the correct answer. It's just another source of information. If you're writing political history, you won't just interview the Stalin or someone and say, well, what were you doing? Oh, okay, now I understand. No, you've got to have your own interpretation of what Stalin was doing, and and artists sometimes could even deliberately mislead you. They don't want you to, like for example, about influences. A lot of modern artists, not Van Gogh, but a lot of modern artists almost would like to give the impression that, well, I didn't actually have any parents as such. I sort of gave birth to myself. As an artist, they don't want you to think that they may actually have learned something from someone else. The emphasis, I suppose, here above everything is on the eyes. That's partly the simplification of the background creates that emphasis. Eyes as the window to the soul. The empty background also creates that sense of an individual human being separated from the rest of the world. Alienation, separation, the condition of individuality in the modern world. We are all on our own, confronting everything. Let's compare to some other portraits just to give a sense of quite how unusual what Van Gogh has done is. This is a typical portrait of the 18th century. It's a Reynolds portrait of Lord Middleton. What was portraiture about? It wasn't about telling you the inner workings of the soul. It was about conveying a sense of the outer social status of the man. So hence the emphasis on his dress. Of course, he's shown being a very noble person or something. He may not have been. He may have been, a terrible person for all we know. But Reynolds would never be telling you that, because this is being paid for by Lord Middleton, and he knows what it's meant. The portrait's meant to say something very positive. The inner life of Lord Middleton is none of your business, as it were. Rembrandt's a fellow Dutch artist of Van Gogh, who was very interested in self-portraiture too. So I'm sure that Rembrandt was someone who's in Van Gogh's mind when he's coming back again and again to self-portraiture. Rembrandt documents his own appearance through many different phases of his life, and sometimes he's showing the outer role of the man, self-portrait as an artist. Other times he's showing more, especially in these slightly later ones, he's letting you come inside a bit more. There's more of a sense of the interiority of the figure. And in the 19th century, you're starting to see artists represent portraits of mental instability. So here's Géricault. He made a series of these portraits of people suffering from different mental conditions. This is the kleptomaniac, someone who can't help but collect things. It's all kind of background leading up to what Van Gogh did. Much more realist in idiom, but very striking. Or the English romantic painter Samuel Palmer. Again, there's that emphasis on the eyes. So this is a romantic era self-portrait. The bare, empty background that helps concentrate you on his inner spirit. Of course, it's always self-dramatizing. It says nothing about the truthfulness of these images, of what the person may actually have felt. You're always sort of playing a role, if you like, in portraiture. I could represent myself in a self-portrait if I had the skill to do so as a soldier, holding a machine gun. You can represent someone as anything. I've never held a machine gun. I hope never to. And I certainly don't plan to become a soldier. But I could represent myself as that. Anything could be. It's not about truth, I want to say. Well, sometimes people think of this as the last painting made by Van Gogh. I think, if I remember correctly, in the film Lust for Life with Kirk Douglas, that this is the painting on his easel when he shoots himself, at the end of the film. But actually, no, it was painted, I think, about a month before he died. But it's certainly a painting about endings. So people want to read it on to his life, that came to this abrupt end at a tragically young age. Supposedly he shot himself, although some recent biographers are starting to doubt that. That someone has come up with a theory that maybe he was shot by some kids playing with a gun, and he decided to take responsibility for it or something like that, not to let the kids get in trouble or something like that. I've not really gone into it myself as to how plausible all that is, but anyway, there's some doubt about the whole story now, apparently. I think people want to read it onto his actual biography at the end of his own life because it's dealing with ends of life as a subject. But what I hope I've shown is that life and death is a theme that's there through all of his mature work. It's not just something that he comes to biographically at the end, what turns out to be the end of his own life. He's dealing with life and death because that's a great human concern that art often deals with, and he's trying to find his own new way to deal with it. So let's look at it that way. If the work has something to say, it's not just as a record of his own life. It's a record of a comment on the human condition. So the sky is very dark and pregnant with thunder or something like that. That a storm may be coming. The birds, the crows, well, that's associated with death symbolically. Are rising up. The corn is ripe, ready for harvesting. It's at the end of life. In fact, maybe the corn in the foreground has already been cleared. We're seeing the edge of the clearing of the field. So it's at the end of something. The road leads, it seems to become a sort of dead end into the corn. There's a sense of abrupt endings. So all these things give the work its symbolic connotation. And again, very much at the level of the brushwork, there's this rhythmic unity, prominent individual strokes, very textured. Actually done pretty quickly, I would imagine. Very summary approach to everything. Wonderful dynamic sense that, okay, you lose something in terms of realism, of not telling you about each individual, grain of wheat. Well, you try and paint a realistic painting and show each grain of wheat, you'll find it's almost impossible. Even the most realist painter would be summarizing what they see in one way or another. But by sacrificing realistic detail, then you gain something in terms of the rhythmic power of the image, the unity of the image as well, the dynamism of the image. I have painted 3 more canvases, Van Gogh says. They are vast fields of wheat under troubled skies, and I did not need to go out of my way to express sadness and extreme loneliness. So again, he's talking about what mood he wants to put into the image. So that's the end of my look through in chronological terms at Van Gogh's life, but just quickly to flash through a few more of his work. In fact, we'll leave Gauguin for next week. Another example of his copies of Millet, he called them really translations. Yeah, translation is a creative art in its own right. The Millet painting doesn't tell you how to copy it into your own style. That's up to you. One of the most famous images, it's in the National Gallery, London. It's one, I don't know now, but it used to be, I think, the second most popular postcard that they sold in the bookstore. The first one was a Leonardo cartoon, and the second was this. So it's very iconic, as Van Gogh tends to be. I think of it back to the image of the boots we looked at the beginning, near the beginning last week. A portrait by proxy. In this case, it's a self-portrait by proxy. It's a portrait of his own chair. There's another work that he did, a sort of companion, which is Gauguin's chair. After Gauguin left, he painted Gauguin's chair as a sort of portrait by proxy. He'd sort of not quite being able to bring himself to make Gauguin's portrait. He couldn't quite do it, but he did this portrait by proxy instead. Presence and absence. Here's the Gauguin portrait. There's was a famous painting drawing which was anyway, it was illustrated in a magazine, an English illustrated magazine, that an artist did of Charles Dickens' chair, and he did it the day Dickens died. He went that very day. He painted his chair at Gad's Hill, where he lived, with his objects around the chair, and I think that was one of the influences on Van Gogh for this kind of thing. The portrait of Dr. Gachet, the doctor who looked after him when he was having his illnesses late in life, when he was back up in Auvers. The doctor's holding a plant. This plant is the foxglove. Foxglove is often used in herbal medicine. It's a source even of a modern day heart drug called digitalin. So it's used to treat heart problems. And maybe even the doctor himself is suffering from heart problem in a metaphorical sense. He doesn't look very happy. This pose with leaning on one arm is the traditional pose associated with melancholy. the sadness of depression. You see it in a Dürer print, for instance. So what do we have here? Maybe it's Van Gogh projecting his emotions onto the doctor, or it could be, he actually does say when he met the doctor that he seemed very sad. Actually his wife was already dead by that time. But also Dr. Gachet, when he was a student, he wrote his thesis on melancholy. So that was his particular interest. So maybe Van Gogh knows that and he's picking this up. Complementary colours side by side, red with green, orange and blue again, very strong in Van Gogh's thinking. Yeah, so this pose is associated with melancholy. I won't talk about this one. I have to show you this because it's so famous, this Starry Night. It's part of that sequence of nighttime scenes. I don't think it would have been painted out of doors because he was in the asylum when he did this, and he wasn't allowed to paint out of doors at night, at that time. Again, the cypress tree is so important in the whole composition. Echoes the form of the church steeple. Night and day, again, night dominates, but you have the little pins of light of the windows, the home. It's like the artificial light of the night cafe and so forth. And again, it's a well established sort of image that's been recycled as cliche. So here it's recycled as a cliche to sell chocolates, give some cultural flavor to chocolates, make it seem more classy. This is another copy of another artist's work, and it gives you a good sense of how he changes things in the translation. This is the original. It's a print by Gustave Doré. He did a whole series of prints, French artists, of scenes in London, and this is of prisoners exercising in Newgate jail. So it's a very much a realist image. So Van Gogh is still interested in realism, but he's changed it, given it his own association. He's turned this exercising circle of prisoners into a kind of metaphor of the human condition, trapped in an endless hell-like circle of movement, and given the figure most prominent looking out at us something of his own features, which is not really the case in the original. You see how he's changed things, created the greater sense of entrapment by the walls, distorting the forms of the walls. Yeah, so that's enough for today. So we'll start fresh with Gauguin next week.